Guys, this is Jace Parks, obviously the S&C coach at Exeter Chiefs. Previously, unluckily, good friends with Django. Just what we're going to go through today is actually understanding what it takes to be a professional athlete, as well as from a coaching perspective and from a being an athlete to coach perspective. So Parks, you just introduce yourself and just say hello, really, man.
Yeah. Hey. First and foremost, not many people want to speak to me, so an absolute privilege to if you guys want to take the time to ask me a few questions and hopefully be able to add some value to the platform that you guys put out. So thank you very, very much, first and foremost. Secondly, so I'm I'm one of the strength and conditioning coaches at the Exeter Chiefs. I've got a head of strength and conditioning, Mark Twiggs, who leads our department. And then there's another two gentlemen, one guy who heads up the academy and overlooks all of our data collection called Robbie Bedard, and another guy who heads up our rehab called Nick Cox. And then myself, so we look after somewhere around, say, close to 70 athletes, which are everything from 17, 18 years old up to, I think our oldest 35 or 36. So very wide range of ages, huge demographic from 70 something kilos to 130 on a bad day for some of them. And so our role encompasses making sure that those guys are fit, healthy, and well to try and play rugby. My sort of career-wise, I'd say I've spent 12 years now, I think, as an S&C coach, which seems like forever. I don't feel old, but I'm definitely getting that way. And then prior to that, I was really, really fortunate to be able to try my hand at professional rugby for 8 years, which is, as you say, where I know James Forrest from Django, say the big nose.
Big nose.
Oh, unbelievably big nose.
Oof.
Really wobbly knees. But yeah, so yeah, that's me. So professional rugby's been my mainstay throughout. I've been incredibly fortunate to be able to make a living from it for so long. So yeah, long may it continue, I say.
Sweet. Amen. That's awesome. Beautiful, man. Can you, just kicking things off, man, can you just give us a little bit about your philosophy with regards to training, from the new guys that are coming in, from the 18-year-olds all the way to the older blokes and the more kind of experienced players? What's your kind of go-to? How do you kind of structure that? If you look at the longevity of a rugby player, how would you kind of describe that path?
Yeah, so it is super interesting. I think the classical strength and conditioning model is, potentially a little bit outdated nowadays with what we're trying to achieve. And I'm sure that the majority of people in any sport, and you guys will be the same from what I've seen, what you guys are doing and what's going on over there, and similarly in human day-to-day performance, is that we're no longer, for our guys, it's no longer how strong can you be. We've got to look at where do they need to be, what do they need to achieve, and how are we going to get them there. So for our guys, what's the most important thing? The most important thing is that these guys are phenomenal rugby players. And it's my job to make sure I can help them as much as possible to fulfill that criteria. If I've got somebody who is incredibly strong, maxes out all their strength tests, gets on the field and drops the ball, then I haven't done my job. If I've got somebody who wins the fitness test, isn't injured all year but can't get picked because he trains like a lemon, I haven't done my job. I'm not then facilitating what those guys need to do. I think it's pretty obvious if you looked at the world's strongest man that our guys are incredibly strong, but they are not the world's strongest man, and that is not our goal. Our goal is to make sure these guys are fit and capable to be able to go all season, which is a long season, man. 38 weeks, week in, week out, rugby, bang, 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 pressure, big games, big collisions. It's a huge amount on these guys' shoulders. So it's making sure that they can facilitate all the training sessions, because if you train really hard and you are out on the field for the rugby sessions, you're going to get better at rugby. If you're out on the rugby sessions and you're getting better at rugby and you're impressing the coaches, you're more likely to get picked. If you are improving your technical and tactical, and you're able to get out there and know the game plan inside out, you're going to be in a better position to perform when you're given that opportunity. And that may sound a little bit like I'm reneging on my responsibility as a coach. Oh, they're not fit, strong. Well, if I can get somebody who, we'll use bench press just because it's an easy one. So somebody's capability to bench press is, say, for argument's sake, a super strong guy, 180. Yeah, I've got him at 160. Is that 20 kilos going to make much difference to how he plays? I'd bet my bottom dollar that it's not. That's not going to be the difference. This guy's, can we swear on here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This guy's fucking strong. He is fucking strong. Right. If he can bench, if he can bench 160, I sure as hell can make him bench 180 if you give me the time. But that's not where my time's efficiently spent. I've got to make sure that he's got no overriding pathologies which are going to limit him from running around out on the pitch. Because like you look at our props, those guys can be covering sort of 17, 18 kilometers in a massive week with training, a big game, getting off the floor, hitting scrums, 80 collisions in the match. You know, the demands aren't just what we see as a strength and conditioning coach in front of us. I think it's really important that we look at what's the end goal, and the end goal is unbelievable rugby players that can go week in, week out through training and games and perform at a high level.
So do you feel, so does it sound like you're, go on, Bill.
No. Go on.
I was going to say, so do you feel that obviously the season's massive, and then obviously you've all got pre-season on that, and then they've probably only got 3 or 4 weeks off, total off, but most blokes at that level don't have it off. They go and work on whether it's speed or losing weight or whatever. Or some don't. Some just go and eat chips and get massive because they know they've got pre-season coming on. But so would you say that when you're training these athletes during that 38 weeks, you're literally just you're tapping the accelerator. You're just making sure they keep moving forward rather than look at pre-season is where you're going to get the most of their games, obviously. But during the season, you're not really looking for the, like you said, the stuff that we love, the strength and conditioning side of stuff is like, right, I can get him to bench load or whether his squat can go up by 20% or whatever. You're just going, right, hang on, keep him in the game, assess him each week. I can get him to 80% in the gym, I know that he's going to perform better on the pitch rather than, like you said, is we want them to be performing better metrically or whatever. Do you think that's what happens?
Definitely. I think like a good analogy, say the juggler. So you've got an expert level juggler, which I'm not, and you've got 6 or 7 balls up in the air, and every now and then you are going to drop a ball, and that's not essential as long as you keep all the other ones going. So our guys need to have the capability, no matter where you are, whether say if you're not playing, that's an opportunity. So utilize that opportunity. Say if you are coming off the bench, that's another opportunity. Say if you're playing, then that's another opportunity. And it's how you digest all of those different opportunities and make out of it. If you're playing, you're going to get better at playing and you're going to get better at performing. So that's your opportunity there. If you're not involved, you've got an opportunity to improve yourself physically. So you can notch it up and get that extra gym session in. You can spend a bit more time on some power output work, which is really difficult to do when the guys are playing because they're so banged up. Or you can really nail down your body composition, or whatever it may be. So it's just about framing everything appropriately for the different person and making sure that you've got more than one outcome based for every week, or for each person for every week. It's not the same for everyone. It's massively transient. It changes. It can change day to day on people's moods. It can change week to week on selection. You know, it is a very changeable environment, very changeable ecosystem. So it's about being prepared for all of the different scenarios and making sure that when somebody needs a bit more of something, they're getting it. If they are, as you say, a little bit banged up and one of their old pathologies is coming into play because it's load exposes something for them and they've had big load, it's about having the tools in your toolbox to be able to fix that.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I just think about, like, you know, I know that the rugby season is massively long now. Mm-hmm. Over the years, have you found that now recently the guys are getting a lot more injured because the seasons are just so much longer?
Not particularly more injured. Like, the coaches are great. As I said, we've got a huge squad, and there are 3 different competitions that we run in, or 4 different competitions actually. So the top 2 competitions, which are the Premiership in Europe, are they're the big 2, and that's where your big guns get used. And then outside of that, they rotate through the squad a bit, and they do try and make sure the guys have some downtime, have some breaks. And then outside of that, the big collision injuries, I don't think it matters how many games you play. To a certain extent, sometimes some of them are going to happen, and sometimes some of them will be potentially based, but we're never going to be able to tell that, say, with the current.
And just coming off that question, do you find that the lifespan of a player has shortened because they're just playing so much compared to a good couple of years ago?
Like, again, it's very individual. We've got some guys who I think I could play every week and it wouldn't change. The way I look at it is, for some guys, the work that they do during the week and week in, week out will be like, it'll be reasonably well within their capacity, and they can perform at a high level. They're physically very well put together. They don't have any huge compensations or dysfunctions, and they roll along pretty well. Like, and those are the guys, and that when they're really good and really do have a great game, they're operating right up there. They're almost better than quite a few of the guys. And you've got some guys who every week are just on that treadmill trying to keep up, and those are the guys that you struggle with. So the guys who've got, say, more either something that hasn't been rehabbed properly, or just global dysfunctions that lead to horrific compensations that mean that they're very easily exposed by load. So I think that would be the way to look at it. For some guys, yes. For some guys, no. You see these guys that are injury prone, so to speak, or whatever it may be. But I generally find that they are people who have got something either which hasn't been picked up, which means that they are on the edge of nowhere all the time, or you've got these guys. We've got let's say if you get the opportunity, have a look at a guy called Ian Witten that plays for us in the centre, Irishman. Honestly, the bloke's he's a monster. Doesn't miss training, doesn't miss games, and plays at a high level. He's a freak, and he's a physical freak. If you saw him, like, he's the type of guy that if he got into CrossFit when he was 12, he'd be Matt Fraser now. You know what I mean? Like, fast, 105 kilos, lean. Say squats for fun, chins, like anything. He can just do anything. You throw anything at him, he'll stick. He's one of those people that make me look like a good trainer just because he's in crazy shape.
Hey, we need those, boss. We need some of them, definitely.
I've got about 70 of them, don't worry.
and kind of just, once the guys are finished, I know Will's got a lovely question for you, kind of when they kind of come out of, they go into retirement, etc. Well, let's take it away with that one, man.
So, a question we were thinking, obviously, you've been on both sides of the spectrum, playing at a pro level against some of the best in the world, or whatever, and
training at a pro level, mate. Not
training. We'll pretend. Holding bags at a pro level.
Oh, mate, unbelievable bag holder I am.
Very good bag holder. At least you'd smoke Django in a bag for sure. Anyway,
I wouldn't tell him, but he was annoyingly good. It's like everything he does. Somehow he just managed to.
Wouldn't he? Just have long legs just run around you. So when you, I mean, obviously, I didn't play as high as you, but I came from. I played a bit of pro rugby and then pulled out, and then I did a couple of years and I was sort of retired. I just find it really interesting to see players' transitions. I think some do what you've done, which is get into a job that they love and they're passionate and they thrive in that environment. But there's also a lot of guys that fall off the wagon out of rugby. They either physically get into the worst shape of their life and do all sorts of dull shit, or they don't have the direction and they get into jobs they haven't got a clue. So I just more of your sort of like how you did, what you found was the positives of what you did, and for anybody who's going to be listening, who's in the position of they're changing their life from being a pro to a normal to more of a normal human or part of society. What were your takeaways from that?
Like, it really interesting. It was the question that probably generated the most thought for myself out of all of these. I'll start. So I literally wrote in my notes. I wrote happiness, fulfillment, challenges, opportunities, and give back to the game that gave them everything. Those are my notes. And to expand on that, I think this is a hugely volatile area for a lot of people. I think it's massively underestimated how empty or potentially exposed people can feel at the end of their rugby career.
Identity, yeah.
Say again?
It's identity. All about identity.
Yeah, massively, like essentially. And I think that there is a lot of work going into it, but I know people personally that have suffered with coming out the other side and what it takes. And it's very easy for me to write those words down because I've been fortunate enough to fall into a position where I get fulfillment and challenged with my work. But it's about the process starting earlier, and it is about the powers that be and people that influence this part of the sport have a really positive input into people's opportunities and frame what they're doing and how important it is really appropriately and give them the opportunity to find what they really enjoy. And because if like anything, if you can find something that challenges you, then you will get that fulfillment and that happiness, and you'll create opportunities for yourself. But it's easier said than done, because when you're a 19, 20-year-old and you're, say, flying around what these boys earn now, and you're, say running around feeling like the, say, big dick on campus, it's all great, but then I think it kick you in the nuts pretty hard. And if 2 years later, you pick up an injury, or now you see some unbelievable players not getting contracts because of the wage cap, and that's going to probably change again now because of this, say, coronavirus and the pandemic having a massive effect on the monetization of the game at the moment. So it's it's very difficult for me to give solutions that are better than what they've got at the moment, because I don't think I've got them, but I do think that they're going in the right way. Obviously, there's the RPA are doing great things at the elite level, and they've got people in clubs, and they are helping people get out there and improve their skill sets and try and find things that they enjoy and want to do. The other thing, sorry to slightly change tack, is that I also think you find people that it's just in their nature, like they're doers. They get out there and they do shit, and they want to be better at stuff, and they want to find opportunities, and they want to be busy, and they want to be fulfilled. And then you find some people that aren't that fussed. And I think those two groups you can really help and you can't really help, but it's those guys that fall in between those, that fall in between those two groups, the ones that need the most help, because they're the ones who like, oh,
interesting.
So it's not really a, like, I think it's a, let's say, a very volatile area, but I don't think I've got the answers, but I do think they need to keep.
I don't think anybody has. I think it's more, I think, I mean, like I said, I didn't get anywhere as high as I wanted to. But then when I stopped, exactly. But it's a funny one when you finish rugby. It is that identity. You believe when you're in rugby, you think that's all you are, and then when it stops and you think, hang on a minute, you're like exactly what you have, a crossroad of doing stuff and just making stuff and doing stuff for yourself. Like I went down the health and fitness route, and because I love developing people, and I realized that quite early on. But I wanted to do that, whereas I didn't feel. I think other people, like you said, they're waiting for the opportunity, and a lot of the guys who I assume, when they're at a super high level, literally have their bums wiped for them because they have to, because they're a commodity. But then when it comes down to real life, they have to make it happen themselves. And I think that's quite a hard challenge for people to actually get their head around at first.
Yeah. Or even they don't have to make it happen because they get paid so much money that, say, why would you? Say you don't need to do anything. Like, I'm getting paid hundreds of thousands of pounds a month. Why am I going to say, why am I going to do anything else? I'll be fine. It's a very, but that also ranges from then kids who aren't earning much money, who go like, oh, I can do anything. I can do anything I want because it doesn't really matter. I'm only earning rubbish money. The fulfillment basket isn't being filled, or bucket isn't being filled for them. And so they're like, well, it doesn't matter if the next one doesn't do the same for me. So I think it's really important that it's framed appropriately for those guys.
Yeah. Let's if you don't mind, steal a little more back into the training,
Yeah, for sure.
if okay with you. Yeah, so we totally understand you have this massive group of guys that some of them have just come into kind of the team or whatever it might be, and some guys have been there for years. I think you're quite interested just to see how you guys, differentiate their training programs, and are they all on individual training programs? It's be quite interesting just to see how you guys break that down, and a bit more, give more insight into that.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of missed out on that on the first question. Apologies.
It's okay.
So yeah, with our team, so Robbie Bedard looks after all of the senior academy guys. So that's up to anything up to sort of 22, 23 for some of them. Then I look after the front rowers and the back three and a couple of centers. And Twigsy looks after the middle five, scrum halves, fly offs, and a couple of centers. So the squad's split down positionally. From those guys, we all write individual programs for them. But make no mistake, an individual program doesn't mean every player's got a different exercise. There's some foundational movements which are massively important. A lot of the individualization comes back, and I use the Mike Boyle terms because I think they sit really appropriately for most people. It's say that those guys who've got specific compensations or dysfunctions and it's about ensuring that you get them out of those and utilize your program to ensure that they are not enhancing their deficits, but they're improving them. So we are to use the term very loosely, because I think we'll discuss it later, healthier, but it's healthier for rugby. It's not healthier for cardiac screening or whatever it may be, if that makes sense. So the individualization is there, and it's very prominent, and we spend a lot of time trying to make sure that between us and the physios that the guys have programs that are going to push their needle in the right direction, but that doesn't mean that everyone's doing a different exercise. And then for the young guys, so these 18 to say 21, 22, 23-year-olds, those guys again will have slightly different needs, be it hypertrophic, be it stability, be it movement, be it whatever it may be. So I think, so you guys have been in training long enough to know, you say everyone might be doing Bulgarian, say, well, rear foot elevated split squats, but somebody might be front loaded because they've got no shoulder rear. Somebody might be dumbbell because if they've got a bar on their back, say it promotes an SI dysfunction, or somebody might have, say somebody might not be able to because they're too far extended, so they're in a split squat. So it's those sort of considerations that we're looking at.
Yeah, I think also just coming back to individualized programming is like it kind of breaks away from the team element quite quickly if every single person is just doing their own thing. And you're obviously using your training as building camaraderie with the team, and all that, all those additional elements that are not really going to be present if everyone is just doing their own thing on their own. Yeah, an environment. No,
but say hugely, and I think, and we're really fortunate. We've got our population generally seems to enjoy the gym, probably more so when I'm not there than when I am there. But say generally, they say that our guys lift and enjoy it, and they get after their big lifts really well when the opportunities arise, and it's a good place to be. They're very fortunate individuals, and by fortune, the meeting of luck and opportunity. Their opportunity is they've worked really hard, and they've probably had some really good games at the right time, and they've ended up with us, and it's about us to make sure that we give them an environment where they can improve upon that.
Yeah. William.
Oosh. I was going to go, sort of covered, we were going to talk about training theory and practice, but I think you just talked about, like you said, the individualization of it all. That's the key. Obviously, that seems to be the key, because every rugby player will be different, and the way they're handling their bodies throughout the season will be very different. But when you're, what I wanted to think for people to sort of understand is when you guys are going for a peaking. So, like you said, you've got championship rugby. You've got for basically going for a title or whatever. What's the sort of demeanor around the gym, and what's the demeanor around your training programs? Is it very, very much, well, I assume it's way more rugby dominant? Is it just ticking them over, or like is there anything in specifics that you try and sort of work with or work towards whilst in that sort of phase? Or
Mate, to be 100% honest with you, it's keeping homeostasis in terms of we want to make sure we're not making them sore. We want to make sure we're making them feel like $1 million. We want to make sure they're walking around feeling like they're king of the world. And that's, the rugby program stays very similar. We probably bring a little bit of volume down. We give them the opportunity just to freshen up. So like just simple psychological, physiological, it's like 3 sets instead of 4 this week. You know, music's a little bit louder. Rugby sessions are a little bit shorter. And you don't need to change too much. It's more about keeping lids on them than anything. These guys, the emotional energy that can be lost through overstimulating guys in those big weeks is huge. You've really got to make sure you're just making them feel good, really. Like if you think about a squad of, say, how many we've got training in those big weeks, like those massive weeks, say we've got 40 guys out training. So the important thing is making sure that everyone's not getting too excited on Wednesday before the game on Saturday. You need to, because the outpouring of emotional energy, like when I've seen it when we've won and we've lost, there's tears everywhere, you know. So it's really important to make sure that's a huge consideration.
Yeah. A big one with regards to training. Are you guys using a lot of wearables and trying to take advantage of technology as much as possible?
Yeah, we try to. Nothing crazy. Everyone's got a GPS monitor, and for every session, everyone's got a heart rate monitor for every session. So we've got the ability to look at internal, external, and mechanical load. Really important to try and marry the two up. But say the two devices. So you've got a measure of intensity, density, and a global volume. We spend a reasonable amount of time looking at what the outputs are, and we look at them on an individual basis, and they're relative as opposed to absolute. So you've got an idea of what somebody's doing compared to themselves. The trick is just to try and make sure, again, like we spoke about earlier, those guys who are playing on, say, when do they need breaks? When have they been consecutive? Do they need a bit of knocking a bit off training, or have they got old pathologies which are starting to be exposed by the load? And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've had a guy who hasn't done his normative load for 4 or 5 weeks. So you need to make sure he has a good push out the following week to make sure that he's resistant to all of the demands that we placed upon him if he is pulled into play.
Yeah.
Do you track stuff like recovery measures like HRV and that kind of stuff, or?
We've looked at it, but HRV in team sports is really tricky because you can have diametrically opposed readings which mean the same thing. So it's much easier in individual athletes. And I know some team sport athletes do use it, but for recovery, it's a huge area which is very individual. Again, like the difference between what one guy likes, which is a part of recovery, and needs, which may be slightly different. It's trying to steer them down the right road. Like we know sleep, nutrition, hydration, bang, 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 easy. Those are the foundations of what we have to do. And then after that, about looking at how can we increase these guys' parasympathetic activity so that these guys have got less sympathetic tone in their musculature, and we are trying to find ways which we can evoke that, and be that through tissue manipulation, be that we've started to use some breathing, which some guys love, some guys don't, or it be through self-managed soft tissue work, or be that through hot water immersion or cold water immersion, depending on what they do and don't like. And I know there's obviously various outputs in the literature to what different things may or may not do, but that's the kind of route we go down.
Yeah, and then kind of with your protocols and getting them into the gym, are you really based more kind of on subjective measures like real numbers and hitting these numbers, etc., and heart rate, this, that, and the other, or are you kind of more inclined to go on subjective measures, kind of like rate of perceived exertion, or are you more on the objective side?
Yeah, and say in the gym, I think it's about knowing your athlete. And again, so if you've got a tight head prop who's had 80 collisions on Saturday, what you expect of him is going to be very different to the guy who didn't get on. So I think that's where, for me, coaching is like the longer you're in the game, the more you're, I guess, licensed to a certain extent to be able to manipulate those relationships and understand people. I think that's probably how our gym works to a certain extent. We've got some stuff that is essential, like in terms of modality, like for tissue health, making sure you've got your eccentric hamstring working in there, making sure the guys are run fast, making sure that all of their posterior chain work's looked after, making sure guys who've got individual deficits get through that work. But how you scale it and at what level has to be subjective for these guys, because again, if a guy hasn't played for 6 weeks, you should be expecting him to get in and they're getting after it. But then if he's feeling like shit and's just had an argument with the coach about not being selected, again, things change again. So it's about being aware, about being astute, and about keeping an eye on what's going on all the time. So if there's a decline, you can figure out why. If they're on the right path, then you say to what you expect to be the right path, then you know guys are going to be able to perform. And that again comes out as make them unreal rugby players, make them PhDs in their sport. Yeah.
And then with regards to you guys are obviously working with sports psychologists, I can imagine. You have conversations with them and kind of figure out where that athlete is at the moment, and going to training sessions, hypothetically the athlete is just totally kind of done it and has no capacity to really push themselves mentally. Do you take those things into account?
Yeah, I think that. So we do have a guy that comes in and spends time with a select part of the group, like say select individuals who potentially need some help with those challenges. And say some guys literally could go see the site. Yeah, still sweet, still cracking on. Some guys will utilize him very heavily. And again, say I've spent 6, 7, 8 years with some of these guys, and they're as much. I know as much about them as I do many of my mates. Like you can tell when they're off, and you can tell when they're on. And when they're off, yeah, you can lean on those. You can lean on the trends that the psych's giving you around why people might be like that, be it something that happens to them when they're a kid, or how they respond to pressure, or how external stress plays a part on their mood. And then it's down to the individual coach to manipulate the variables in front of you and try and get a positive outcome and try and help the individual out. And like Will said earlier, if like what he say similarly, the thing I enjoy doing is making better people, making people better versions of themselves, if you like. And I think by getting to really know them, you can potentially help them with that through that avenue. But again, getting information from people who are qualified and understand the dynamics that go into individual to go into individuals being who they are and how they are.
Yeah.
But it's a massive part of it. But I think good coaches are good at that, and they do understand that.
I think that could lead us on to. Come.
Sorry, William, go for it, mate.
No, go. You're in. You got it.
So I was just kind of, I think, gone are the days of just really banging on the physical element of coaching. And there's so much more that goes into it, right? And a lot of it is in between the years. And, as coaches and as an athletes get a lot smarter with regards to their game, I think it's a case of like, if you're not dealing with, as you said a little bit earlier about all your different facets, your mindset, your physical, your environment, your nutrition, then you're going to fall off the bus a little bit.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, and you'll miss opportunities as well. And say for so many of us, if you are working at making that person a better version of themselves, they'll start picking up on those things. They'll start understanding why it's important for them. They'll start rising to the challenge and gaining fulfillment from areas outside of just playing, which is, again, what we spoke about earlier, really important for those guys longer term.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, William, have you got any closing questions, William?
No, more. I think what you just illustrated there, the way that it's very obvious that the Chiefs, it's a massive environmental factor there for why they're so successful. And what we talked about before, is the transition between performance and actual what health is, and how similar. I talked to a fellow the other day about the sliding scale between a professional athlete and a non-professional athlete. But I think from what you're saying is the environmental stuff as well. It's sliding from the scale of being a professional and aiming at performance, but also aiming at performance in life. And it's more how do you find that happens? You may obviously you deal with high-end professional athletes, but later on you'll be doing sort of normal population. If they were listening, what would you say would be the similarities, and what they should sort of take away from it?
I think that, say, really interesting. Healthy is healthy for what? Like being healthy for CrossFit, being healthy is one thing for Dylan. Being healthy for rugby is something else. Being healthy for a marathon is something else, and being healthy. But I think the one thing that all of them have in common is being healthy for life. And I do think there are some traits which, no matter what, you can give yourself a solid foundation to move forward and make better decisions. I think that's everything from morality and integrity to and how you treat people. And from all of that strong foundation comes the ability to be able to influence people in a more positive manner, to be able to get people on board with what you're trying to do, which is essential in a team environment, be able to make tough calls on people when they aren't doing what they should be doing, and having an environment where that's okay, but people don't necessarily take offense to it, but you do it in the appropriate manner. And then I think if you've got all of those underpinnings, no matter what game you're in, be that game rugby or be that game life or be that, say, a game of being an accountant, we've all known and seen high level people who are just absolutely class people, and they'd be class people no matter what they did. And I think for me, that is what you're always trying to do. You're trying to not make knobs. You're trying to, you know what I mean?
Amen. Preach.
There's enough out there already.
But yeah, so you're trying to make people understand why humans as we are. This pandemic's been an absolutely fantastic reminder to us all of what the foundations of being a human being are, and that's, say, relationships and working together as groups, say, for specific outcomes, be that hunting for food back in the day to making people healthier like you guys and us, or working together to say make a vaccine for this, whatever it may be. That's what humans were built to do. We're built to work together in teams, and that's where we're at our best, and that's where we get all of the all of these amazing hormonal responses that mean we buy into things, and we get the dopamine, we get the endorphins, the serotonin, the oxytocin, and we buy into things, commit together, and the power of many is so much more than the power of few. And if we can really harness those things, I don't think it matters what you're in, you're going to have a hugely successful outcome. So I don't know if that really answers your question or if I've danced around.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Just awesome closing words there. That it does, this kind of COVID-19 lockdown period has definitely brought light on many elements, more human elements. I think especially kind of being in a place like Singapore, we've experienced, people are just living for material stuff. And, at the moment you can't get that. And it's just opened up so many different kind of, get people thinking about real things.
Yeah, that's not how we biologically put together to be at our best, to be fulfilled. It's about having that challenge and that goal and being able to have something that we can reach for and strive for, and that's what really brings the best out of us. And and especially when we're doing it together in groups, and we've got other people to lean on and help each other out, I think that's hugely important.
Absolutely.
Massive. Awesome.
All right, mate. Well, a big thank you for your time today.
Not at all.
Thank you very much, man.
Yeah, that was great. That was really good, man. And just to find out a bit about, pro level rugby, which is good. And I think coming down to that kind of point of like, high performers all kind of are reading from the same book, just communicating slightly differently. And have their, have those certain criteria that they're hitting. That's going to be imperative for them to get anywhere in life.
Yeah, definitely.
Wicked.
That's
Great
awesome.
stuff.
Thank you very
Easy.
much, man.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for taking the time. Very much.
It's a pleasure having you on, man. It was awesome to speak to you, and as I said, we'll catch up again soon for sure.
Yeah, if I can,
Brilliant.
if I can ever be of any help outside of this, just say please do ask.
Thanks, brother.
Legend.
No
Thank you very much, man.
Okay.
What you
Look
boys
after yourself.
What you